Right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where in the world you're calling from. And welcome to today's AI Agents for Finance 101, a practical guide to getting started. Thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate you carving out time on a Thursday morning, and I promise it will be worth it. Special thanks to our friends tuning in from the UK and EU who are catching this replay of today's live session on Friday morning. We're glad you're here too. My name is Nick, and I'm the VP of Marketing here at Auditoria, and I'll be your host for the next hour. A couple of quick housekeeping notes before we dive right in. First, today's session will be recorded, and we'll try to send this recording out to all the registered attendees as soon as we can. So no need to worry about capturing everything in real time. Second, we will have a dedicated question and answer session at the very end of this webcast. If a question comes to mind while Mark's presenting, don't hesitate. Just go ahead and use the QA button at the bottom of your Zoom window to submit. We'll collect everything and work through it together at the end. Now, let me introduce today's speaker. Mark McDonald is the founder of Finance Next, where he works with finance leaders navigating the shift to AI-driven operations. Mark has spent years at the intersection of finance and technology, helping teams cut through the hype and get to what actually works. Practical frameworks, real-time use cases, and a clear decision-making model that doesn't require a PhD in artificial intelligence to apply. Today's Today in Agents for Finance 101, Mark is going to show you how to bridge the gap between curiosity and action. Specifically, how your finance team can realistically start using AI agents this quarter, not next year. You will walk away with an understanding of what AI agents actually are, how they differ from traditional automation, and critically, where to start. The lowest risk, highest impact processes in your finance operations. If you've been watching AI from the sidelines and wondering when and how to step in, this session is built for you. With that, Mark, the floor is all yours.
Great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. This is a great topic, agents, right? We've heard a lot about them. It's getting a lot of attention. I think a lot of people are using agents synonymously now with AI. But in finance, we kind of still are at this stage where we haven't really understood them completely yet, or at least not how to make full use of them. So what I want to do in this session is kind of explain what they are, how they work, where we can get them, where we can get our hands on them, and how we can pick, what use cases make the most sense for us, and give you a little insight into, what makes them different and where we need to pay closer attention to them as we go forward. So let's start with some facts and figures that are out there in the market that kind of show us where we are in this whole AI thing. And so surprisingly, last year, we saw an adoption of AI kind of peaking at about 60%. So this is research from Gartner that kind of showed that there was a surge in adoption, and then in 2025 there were kind of no entrants to the topic. And I think a lot of people saw like AI could do some things, but we found these limits. Now, this is just adoption. What we're really interested in is the success rate of AI. And what we saw here in parallel to that at the same time is that it wasn't just adoption that was peaking, it was also success. And maybe it went down a little bit. I'll call that a margin of error. Basically, we see that for 2 years in a row, the success rate was around 30%. That means it's like less than a third of organizations that were beginning to use AI were reporting it as successful, which is kind of concerning. And there are some other surveys and facts that kind of go in stride with this. We had a big research report last year from MIT that reported that 95% of AI projects were resulting in failure, which is a little discouraging. Gartner also reported that people using AI in their jobs were only saving less than 2 hours per week, which is, I guess, something, but not those big, huge gains that we were expecting. And Gartner also reported earlier this year that no, we're not going to get a decrease in headcount, that we can actually expect to see an increase in headcount in the next coming years before we eventually see a decrease. So we hear all these huge claims about how great AI is. Of course, we get these cherry-picked stories in the media about how ROI is through the roof. And you hear facts like this, it makes you wonder, it's like, well, does this really work? Is this like blockchain or like the metaverse all over again? And I will tell you definitively, as somebody who's been now about a decade working on this topic with a front row seat to the roller coaster ride we've been on, that AI definitely works. For sure. Absolutely, it works. I've seen it. See this on a day by day basis. It works. The issue isn't the technology. The issues that we're running into are how do we adopt the technology? How do we adapt to it in our organizations? And we're struggling to make changes to how we introduce the technology to our organizations at the same rate that the technology is exploding. And we're a little behind in finance right now. The technology's ahead of us. So, um, what I want to do in this session is to kind of explain to you why we're seeing that peak and what we need to do or what we can expect in the next year or so that'll help us get past that threshold, that peak, that leveling off that we're seeing. We're going to start by defining what agents are so that you can decide what they are and not let an overinflated news story tell you. We'll talk about where we can find agents, and then we'll talk about building use cases that you can build for your organization that makes sense for you and your using agents before we talk about some key findings and next steps. And then we'll move into Q&A. So we're going to do Q&A live both today on Thursday and in the rebroadcasted session on Friday as well. So if you're listening to either session, put your questions in the chat, and we'll get to them at the end of the slides or at the end of the presentation. So let's dive into defining agents. What is an AI agent? And it might seem like a basic question, but it's gotten confusing. We've gotten a lot of different definitions out there. A lot of them kind of, I don't know what the word is, maybe highly inspired and less factual. So I'm going to describe what they are to you so that you can define it yourself. And to do that, I need to take us through a little bit of a history of how AI came to be. And it kind of starts with this algorithmic category that I call classical AI. And this goes back to like the 1950s, 1960s. It's a collection of algorithms that have evolved over time that work really, really well with numbers. Right? They take in numbers, they apply numbers to a numerical model that spits numbers out. And these got really popular in like the 2010s as computing power, desktop computing power got powerful, and people could do these things right at home at their desk. And that's when we started to see the popularity take off. Now, these algorithms have a huge benefit. They're reliable and they're auditable. Out of the box, these numerical based algorithms do is they produce like a confidence threshold or like an accuracy measure, an empirical measure of how accurate they are when they do some work for you. And that means that we can use them in auditable processes. We can show that it was reasonable to rely on the output of the algorithm. The problems that we run into is that they're difficult to build. They're hard. You need to know what you're doing. This is where we need the famous data scientists involved. You can't naively jump into this topic without some background on the topic. They're also famously dependent on data, and they need a lot of high quality data, which can sometimes be an issue in our environment. So few years ago, I don't need to introduce the big revelation that came out, right? And that's generative AI. There's a different category of algorithms that works with words, written text. And what generative AI does that's so unique is that it understands the relationship between words, and through understanding that relationship between words, it can dissect and respond with meanings behind the words, which seems kind of human-like and magical, but it's a really creative, impressive mathematical technique that's working under the hood. Now, these got popular really fast because, well, we spend our time speaking in words and communicating with text, and it was really intuitive and easy to use for people. But we saw that in the initial days when this first came out with the with the large language models, we saw that they were prone to inconsistencies, otherwise known as hallucinations. And more importantly, that freaked everybody out. But I think the real thing, the real gating factor here with generative AI is that it lacked business data, right? A generic large language model doesn't know about your business, and giving it real-time access to your living daily business data was really hard to do in a consistent, accurate manner. And so while we could kind of see that these things were neat and really useful, some of the shortcomings kind of put success out of reach for us and made it tough for us to move forward. And that's where we saw this leveling in 2025. But recently, and I say recently, it's been, I think it was 2 years ago since I think the first papers or the first research was published on the topic, and only about a year and a half ago that it got into the media, we started to see agentic AI pop up. Now, agentic AI is not an algorithm by itself. It's more of a technique that leverages both these other algorithms and other computing resources that you have. Right? It can combine them all together to solve or to address larger problems. So I'm going to explain that. I'm going to show that in an example. But before we do that, let's take a quick poll. Nick, maybe you can help me do that and see what you think about these.
Sounds great. Awesome. That's great information, by the way, Mark. I had no idea that the evolution went from numbers to text, and now we have this wonderful thing called agentic AI. So on that question, on that point, what option best matches your description of an AI agent? Is it new technology that can think like a person? Is it a chatbot enabled with special tools that can help it complete workflows? Do you think that an AI agent is an LLM that follows a specific set of instructions? Or do you think it's just a marketing term and means nothing technically specific? And as a marketer, I take umbrage at that. So we got about half the participants have answered the question already. We'd love to get your opinion on this. This is the type of thing that always makes our webcasts interactive and fun to be on. So we've got about 65%. Let's give it a 5 second countdown. We'll give it five, four, three, two, one, and all right, we got 72% of the audience. I'll go ahead and read the answers here, and Mark, I'd love to get your reactions on some of these. So, in terms of what people consider to be an AI agent, 21% of people believe that a new AI technology can think like a person. 45%, the lion's share here, believe that an AI agent is a chatbot enabled with special tools that help it complete workflows. And then 34% believe that it's an LLM that follows a specific set of instructions. Thankfully, nobody believes that it's a marketing term and means nothing technically specific. So thank you for that. I will no longer take umbrage at that. So Mark, any thoughts on the what we're seeing on the screen here?
There's a little truth to all of these things in there, and the fact is an agent can be a lot of things. As we'll see, it depends on how we use it, how we configure it. But in some cases, I kind of threw the marketing thing in there just to take a little stab at it because there is a lot of misinformation out there from in the marketing world about what they are, which I think you will see come to light here. So let's go through this and explain how this works. And it starts by starting with the large language models, right? The first ChatGPT instance that you probably used a few years ago was pretty simple in how it worked. And here we interfaced with that large language model using a chatbot, and we put a prompt into the chatbot. And here I put in a simple prompt. My heart aches. What should I do? Right. And so all that really is happening here is that that chatbot is presenting that prompt, those words to the large language model and looking for the most likely response or the most likely set of words that matches a response to that message. Right. And in this case, very simple pattern matching comes back. It says, well, talk to a friend. Okay, well, that might be pretty good advice. I think that's pretty nice, except in the circumstance that you have a pain in your chest and the real answer was to call 911 or get emergency services, right? But that was only the second best response, right? And so here's a pretty, high level, simple example. You can kind of see where these hallucinations come from. Well, an agent handles this a lot differently. It's a little bit more complex, but a lot more valuable. So here in the chat bot, I'm going to ask a question that would be very, very difficult, if not impossible, for a large language model to answer. And that's the current balance of a specific account. Whatever, this could be in a banking term or in accounting terms, whatever. What is the balance of a particular account number? And here, in an agentic enabled environment, the first thing the chatbot does is it asks, what agents does it have available to answer this prompt for me instead of using a large language model? And in this environment, I created 4 fictitious agents here, just as an example, that are enabled to this chatbot environment. And what the agent is here, very simply, simple way to explain it, is a computer program. It's going to take in information. It's going to do something with that information. It's going to send you information back. Couple of notes here is one is an agent can connect to your backend tools and platforms. Really important, right? So it can tap into your systems and get real-time data and give that back to the chatbot. Another interesting point here about agents is they include a written text description of what they do. Right? Something you can read. It's not coded. It's not deeply hidden. It's something that you can read, and it's the promise of what that agent does. So what the chatbot is doing is it's not matching the prompt against this huge large language model. It's matching the prompt against these 4 descriptions in this case, and looking for the one that can best match or best respond to that prompt. If it doesn't find one, it's going to push it to the large language model or some other process. Well, in this case, though, it found one, right? Balance lookup, that's what the user wanted. It's going to delegate the prompt to the balance lookup agent, which will perform that task, respond back to the chatbot. The chatbot will prepare a response and give the user an answer. Right? So this is like a lot different than a large language model. It's not scary, right? It can be, right? We can have these agents do a lot of things. We can control them if we want to, but most importantly is they give us a lot of new power that we didn't have before. Is they can, I gave you a simple example here. They can orchestrate more complex workflows. You can have multiple agents involved to answer a prompt. We can also put in agents like helper agents or stages in these agents that can validate the responses. They can also validate the user, validate authentication for us. Most importantly is they give us access to our tools that we currently use, right? We don't need to rebuild or re-implement our entire landscape to get use out of agents, is we can extend our current landscape with agents to enable them a little differently. Now, a key point here is that agents can act autonomously. This is what we hear a lot in the media. I've kind of poked out a little bit. You can build an agent to say, hey, go figure out how to get something done and pick the best path. That's kind of a remarkable capability, but it's one that we kind of want to shy away from in finance. When we have an agent doing something, we want to do it within a very specific set of guidelines and guardrails. And since we can build these, we can control them, we can add security, we can customize them any way we want. They're not out of control. They're as controlled as we want them to be. So powerful, useful, yes. But there's limitations here and some new challenges. Limitations are basically anytime we have a large language model involved, we run the risk of hallucinations. Okay? And so either the chatbot might fail to recognize an agent that should be answering the prompt, or send it to the wrong agent, or send it to the large language model instead. The chatbot can misinterpret the response and bungle it when it sends it back to the user. There can still be hallucinations and mistakes along the way. Another challenge here that we face is that agents are different than anything we currently use. Right? It's not a person. It's also not a computer system. It's somewhere in between. And where we currently have rules in place right now to monitor and control people and systems, we need to start thinking about a third category of controls and rules to keep an eye on the agents. So that's a lot. Hopefully that helps. Um, let's now take that information and figure out how we get these things in place. How can we take advantage of these things in our environment? And basically, there are three ways that we can get agents. One is to build them yourself, right? This is kind of like that citizen to developer concept. Or we can buy them, buy a standalone agent. You can either enable this through your chatbot. You may have seen that already, right? There's all these little different features that you can enable in a lot of, like the Chat GPT or Claude. Or you can hire somebody to build a standalone agent to do a particular task for you as well. And the third one is to enable an agents that you probably already have access to. And this is most notably in the software platforms that you already use. Right? So software vendors are stepping up very quickly and they're enabling their platforms with agents. And so you can just tap into that and begin to use that um, pretty quickly, actually. So before I dive into these three and explain them and the pros and cons and my recommendations, let's try another poll and see where you all stand on this topic.
All right, great stuff, Mark. So, time to wake up, everybody, and answer another poll question here. So, poll question number two: what is your biggest concern with AI agents in finance? And you have a couple of choices here. One, is it data security and privacy? And that's an important one. Is it accuracy and hallucinations, as Mark just described? Is it auditability? How can you tell what these things are doing and why? Or is it maybe unsanctioned use by employees? Does that happen? Well, let's give people. We got more than half the participants that have replied back, so we're looking at about 66%. Let's give people a 5 second countdown so we can get close to two-thirds, or actually we're at two-thirds. Let's see if we can get three-fourths. We'll give them a five, four, three, two, one, and okay, good. We've got about 70%, 71% of people. So I'll read off the answers as we did last time, and Mark, we'd love to get your color commentary on the other side. So, what is your biggest concern with AI agents in finance? So, 43% of the people on this call today said data security and privacy. Tied with first place, also with 43%, people said their biggest concern is accuracy and hallucinations. Rounding out to the 100 would be 13% are concerned about auditability and the ability to explain what the models are doing. And then nobody on this call had a concern at all about unsanctioned use by employees. So, Mark, thoughts on what the group here has put together?
So there's no wrong answer. They're all concerns. And the operative term here was the biggest concern. Nobody thought that unsanctioned use by employees was their biggest concern, which kind of surprises me because that can be an issue. Especially in the case where we have agents that can solve problems on their own. It is now possible that a user can build something that can take actions and even externally communicate those actions and information from your organization outside. So there is some risk from that. So maybe it's not your biggest
Well,
concern, other ones
let,
are, but
let me ask
that
you a
one
question about
still
that,
is.
Mark. Let's double
Yeah.
click on that. Do you think that maybe the fact that nobody said unsanctioned use by employees means that organizations have more or less just waved the white flag and said, we cannot stop AI. People are going to use it anyway, so we might as well embrace it. Do you think that that could be the answer to that?
Oh, it could be, but that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. I mean, we have to raise the white flag because like you can't really control it. But I think the trick here is the sanctioned piece. It's like let's just document it and understand what's out there so that we can, or maybe educate the employee workforce on what can go wrong here. Um, good. That was good. No wrong answers there. They were all right. Let's describe where we can get these agents from, and maybe that kind of highlights some of these risks and maybe we can mitigate those. So the first option was to build your own agents. What does that look like? Well, we're going to want to use a developer here, citizen developer, much like the RPA environment, to build a tool that can interface with your tools and platforms. Whoops. And right now, like I just listed, put three icons out here representing, some popular products. There are a lot of products that allow you to build your own agents right now. They're quite a few, actually. And they've kind of simplified the design, low or no code kind of solutions where users can do this. And here I'm going to pick just an agent here. I made this up, an agent that can process an invoice, whatever that is. Upload the invoice, extract the information, route it for approval, three-way matching, maybe stage it for payment. Yeah, I picked that because everybody understands AP and everybody has AP. It's not the only use case. Um, so what's the user got to do here? The user needs to design that. They could probably get some help from these tools, and the user's going to need to build something that's going to interface with tools and platforms. So red flag one, right? It's like we've got this new tool in the system that's logging into your systems and pulling data out. Okay. Um, and this might look clean. This might look easy. This might be very compelling, especially for a small organization that doesn't have a big budget and you just want to tinker around with this, see if this works. But there's some concerns, right? I think that as a desktop tool, if you're automating your own work that you're responsible for, I think this is okay. I think this is nice. I think it's good. It's like a better Excel, if you will, but not for an enterprise process, at least not for your first attempt here. I think that the requirement for skills here is a little underestimated. It's pretty easy to get in, over your pay grade here. It can get pretty tough. Even no code solutions can be hard. Um, and now I have a new tool in the environment that I'm going to need to change and update when I have changes to my environment. I need to keep an eye on that security. And that just basically means I've got a new thing that I need to maintain and oversee. And you can quickly create something. If you create a lot of these, you can quickly get out of control. And so, you can kind of tell by my tone, I'm giving that one a thumbs down, at least for now. Option two here is to buy an agent. So this is kind of a broad category, right? We can either enable something that might be available in whatever chatbot tool you use, or you could maybe get something from an external marketplace that has an agent that resides on the web, and you can maybe pay for that, or maybe it's free and enable it in your chatbot. Or you can hire a consultant to build something that might reside locally on your environment. However you do that, you're going to need to access your tools and platforms to make that thing useful. So red flag, right? There's a security issue there that we need to be aware of. And the way your users will interface with that is probably through the chatbot, right? There's not going to be a new interface, a new tool that you log into. The way that these standalone agents that you purchase work is that they will work with your front end tools that you currently use. All right, so what does this look like? Well, there's some security concerns, right? I've got an unknown party to me. If it's a hired consultant, that might be okay. But I've got this party that's now configuring access to my tools and platforms. If it's a third party one that you don't talk to the developer about, I mean, huge red flag. I also have another issue here where if I want to orchestrate this process to work with other tools and maybe other agents, that's going to be tough if that agent isn't designed to be part of a larger orchestrated process. If I have changes to my environment that need to be reflected in that agent, I'm going to need to update that agent. That adds more complexity to my landscape. It adds monitoring. It adds more rules and oversight. And so you can kind of see that I'm leaning again towards the thumbs down on this, just mostly because of the security and the complexity of managing another tool. Hopefully we get a green thumb here soon. Right? Third one's the charm. Enabling an existing agent. So you are using a lot of tools and platforms in your landscape. A lot of them are standard. They're probably big or bigger name tools that you're using. And most organizations, most software vendors are building their landscapes or enabling their landscapes with agents in them. And so you can just simply leverage that capability in a tool that you already own, in a process that you already execute, and get the value out of it. And so what this looks like now is your users would interface with that agent the same way that they interface with whatever tool or platform they're using. Right? In the case here of processing an invoice, the user might log into the platform, upload an invoice, and then the rest gets handled by an agent. It extracts the data, it routes the approvals, it does a three-way matching, it makes payments. Or even better, that agent might pick up the invoice from an inbox and automatically do all the processing for you, and the users don't even need to log in. And what's nice here, there's a lot of nice things about this. We can either the use is totally transparent and you don't even see it, just nice, easy for users, little to no training. Or in some cases, we can extend the access to those agents through your chatbots, particularly in the case maybe if you're just pulling information out of your systems. And why I could just pull that information out by asking a question. Now, what does this look like for us? Well, I mean, things sound a little better here already, right? These are agents now that are designed to work with your specific platforms and processes. And if they're finance tools, they're gonna meet your specific requirements: auditability, security, login credentials, and so forth. I'm working with a platform that I already trust. Presumably, hopefully, you trust the vendors in your landscape and you have access to support. Like if there's a change to that tool, the agent's going to change, right? It's also going to be updated. And since vendors understand that they're part of a larger ecosphere, they're going to build their agents to interact or interoperate with other agents from other vendors that are also possibly in your environment. So we get a lot of better tone here on this. This is definitely the best place to start. So just a big takeaway here, use agents from existing finance platforms. Now, if your platforms aren't supporting agents, or maybe they haven't given you any reason to believe that their agents are particularly useful or coming soon, then now might be a time to think about shaking up your landscape a little bit. Things have changed in the last 10 years. And there are newer vendors out there that are doing some pretty remarkable things here that are worth taking a closer look at. All right, moving in towards the end. I hope I've got everybody still on board and this is all making sense. We're going to get into how we can create a use case here using agents. This can still be a little confusing. So let's take a poll question and see what your biggest hurdle is to adopting use cases,
All right, cool.
adopting agents.
All right, this is your cue to take a big drink of water, Mark, and I'll go ahead and read this. Give your vocal cords a little bit of a rest here. So, as Mark suggested, what is your biggest hurdle to adopting agents? Is it finding use cases? Is it technical implementation? Do you have the technical know-how? Is it security, accuracy, and or auditability? A big concern for many organizations, or is it a just lack of governance? So again, I've got about half the people have participated in the poll already. We'd love to, oh, climbing again. I see a lot of people putting their information in here, but two-thirds of the people have answered already. So is it finding use cases? Is it technical implementation? Is it security, accuracy, and/or auditability? Or is it lack of governance? We'll give you a 5-second countdown, everybody. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let's go ahead and present the results of the poll. All right, so what is your biggest hurdle in adopting agents? Well, 24% of you said finding use cases. Where do I start? What's a good use case? 38% said technical implementation. Maybe you don't have the skill sets. Maybe you don't know the right people. Maybe the organization doesn't have the technical know-how. 21% said security, accuracy, and/or auditability. Always a big question in people's minds. And then 17% of people said lack of governance. So not a smooth spread all around, but a little bit for everybody in this poll question. So thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, good. Again, there's no wrong answer here. I generally in the past I'd found finding use cases is the biggest hurdle. As time went on, it did shift towards technical implementation, and that's what I'm seeing here now. And depending on the audience, often security is the highest one. In this last section here, I hope that I will be able to help you get past these, and that maybe you'll find a different hurdle to focus on. But there are ways that we can get past all of that. So I'm going to move forward and we'll start talking about that. Um, Finding a use case here can be a challenge. Um, and the reason for that is that agents aren't comparable to something that we already do. We try to classify things as something that we're familiar with, but agents aren't familiar. They're not people. They're not machines. They're kind of this third entity that's in between, and we haven't quite figured out what this human-like machine thing can do for us. Um, we also have highly integrated processes in finance. It's almost impossible just to take one little piece of a process and carve it out and isolate it and then send that into like this new AI-driven process, right? And so once you touch one thing, everything starts to kind of become impacted. That makes it hard. There are new oversight requirements here, right? This is a whole new entity that's collecting information, doing something with it, and sending it back. We need to double check on that. We need to make sure that that's acting properly. And because we are not familiar with this, we really don't know where to start. We don't know what's the best use case to start with today that sets us up for success tomorrow. And so really there is one way to address all of this. And it's to kind of take a step back and think about what AI does that's unique, right? What is it that AI is doing differently than anything else in our environment has ever done before? And we can nail that down. We can pin that down to one thing, and that's that AI automates thinking. It automates our knowledge work, the thinking processes, right? Everything else, every other technology we've used does things, sorts, filters, parses, prints, whatever. People did all the thinking. And now we have a technology that can do some of the thinking parts, and that is going to force us to rethink our processes. So, if I have a technology that does thinking, the best way to approach this, where to start here, is to think about what's the thinking process. And there is a process to thinking, and I call it a knowledge workflow. It's not new. I didn't invent it. This has been here since forever. And it's three steps, right? We gather information, we use that information to make decisions, and then based on those decisions, we take actions. It's pretty simple. We're all familiar with this. I know we like to joke about acting without information or without making decisions, but basically, this is how it flows. Let's use an example just so you can kind of see this. Again, I'm going to use an accounts payable example because it's familiar to everybody. Let's say the action is to pay an invoice. Well, before I can pay an invoice, I need to make a lot of decisions. I need to ask a lot of questions. Is this a legitimate invoice? Is it a legitimate vendor? Has somebody approved this? Is there a goods receipt? Has three-way matching been done? Is this vendor also a customer? Do they owe us money? Should I be paying an invoice if they owe me money, right? There are a lot of questions, a lot of decisions I need to make before I pay that invoice. And in order to make those decisions, I need information, right? I need information about the purchase, the purchase order, the invoice, the vendor, maybe the material, whatever. There's a lot of information that I need to gather. So that's what we do as people right now. Nice and conveniently, this follows the same process that AI does when we want to use it to automate a process. Right? And so to think about our AI workflow, we can think about that knowledge workflow. And where we start here is we start at the very beginning. Right? The very first step in the process is to gather information, and we can use AI to do that. Gather, validate, and analyze information are use cases that are readily available from a variety of sources. It's becoming a tried and true tested use case for AI in our environment, and it can save you a ton of time. Somewhere between 40 and 80% of mid or lower level management or employees spend their time just gathering, validating, and analyzing data. And we can use AI to do most of that for us. So it's a great place to start. It's easy to validate. A lot of software vendors are already supplying the capability to do this for you. And once you've done that, you start to feel comfortable with that, and you feel that that's working correctly, then we can move on and start using AI to help us make decisions. Now, this is kind of like a premier use case for AI. This is what a lot of those machine learning algorithms do from once upon a time. Um, AI is great at this, and we aren't really using it to its full capabilities yet. And we can use that data to help us decide if it's legit, if this invoice is legitimate, if it's approved, if there's a goods receipt. Those are really easy questions to answer for AI once we have the information. And then finally, taking action on this gets pretty easy once those first two steps are done. Now, here's what's kind of surprising about that last step. We've already automated a lot of those. Really, the hard part isn't the action. The hard part is everything that leads up to the action. And you may even, in some cases, want to continue to use people to do the final action as a last, like, human in the loop step until you feel comfortable that everything's working properly. Now, you may, whether you're using agents or AI from a prepackaged platform, they'll follow a similar process. And they may break that down into those steps, or they may just offer you the whole package together. But knowing this, you can start to break that down into more detail so that you can maybe put some controls and some audits and steps along the way. If you're building this yourself, this is a perfect roadmap for you to get started. There's a lot. So let's kind of slowly wrap up before we head into Q&A. Just a few key takeaways. I know I shared a lot. There were a lot of takeaways, but I'll kind of give you the highlights here. Um, Agents are a big deal. They expand AI's capabilities, and they're going to get us past that hump that we've been in for the last year. This is kind of the year where agents begin to change the bar for us, and we really begin to enter the AI era. Um, Agents are different than people, they're different than machines, and they're going to require a different, more responsible implementation approach. We're going to need to think about what we're doing. We're going to need to be careful. This is not like a typical system where you put it in place and then walk away and ignore it forever. We need to pay attention to what's going on here. I mentioned the autonomous agents, right? Not all agents need to be autonomous. They can be, but they don't need to be. For finance, especially in finance processes, I recommend kind of taking a pause on that until you get comfortable with some more basic agentic processes. And if you want to get started as quickly as possible, look to your vendors to get started. So, concrete next steps, talk to those vendors, see what they have. If they don't tell you what you want to hear or they don't have anything, now is a great time to start looking for new vendors. If you're looking for a use case, you don't know where to start, that data retrieval is the best place to start. Defer complexity until later on, until you build a little maturity with the topic. And then finally, take an inventory of those agents. In this group, there wasn't a fear of unsanctioned use. Maybe there is now after I've shared that with you, but you really want to be careful that you don't have users in your landscape that are using agents that are autonomously taking actions that you don't know about that might be putting your organization at risk. And we want to catalog those things and make sure we don't have those in our environment. All right, I think we're ready to move to Q&A.
All right, great. Well, we've got a couple of questions that came in, so I'd like to thank everybody who put questions in the chat. It's not too late, so if you do have a question that you're dying to ask Mark, please go ahead and use the Q&A button below. But so we'll start with Peter first, and Peter is asking a question. I love this question, by the way, Mark. Peter asks, if I will ultimately use the tool or platform agent, how do you differentiate that from the old development or configuration work done 5 or 10 years ago as you customize such agents? So I guess what's different now than the tools we had 5 or 10 years ago?
Yeah, so we can rely on a lot of the same development processes that we had in the past. But this is a little different, right? So, like in the past, when you developed a tool, you knew what kind of problems were going to come about, right? You could test for all of those. We've no, we've institutionalized a lot of those things because agents can I'm not going to say, I hesitate to say they act unpredictably. Um, they don't act as consistently as a rules-based system. You have to kind of test these things a little differently to kind of make sure that they act within a certain realm. And if they step outside of that threshold or out of that realm of possibilities, that we're catching those and kicking them out and putting them into like a human-based workflow. And that's not always something that we had to do before. Right or wrong used to be, objective. Now, with the tool that does thinking, right or wrong can sometimes be subjective. And that kind of changes our thought process here as to how we go about and implement this.
Another question came in from Vivek, who's asking about security, specifically around security and auditability. So, how do we know what the agents are doing and how they're doing it?
Yeah, so that depends. That's a good question. I'm not sure there is a full answer on that. So, if you're using it from a software vendor, that which I recommend is the first place. Talk to your software vendors. Software vendors know, especially in the finance realm, that this is a question that people are going to ask. And they build that into their platform. They build auditability, they build transparency into the process. In other cases, you might not know exactly how an agent works. And that can be disconcerting. Those should be some red flags. The only thing that you can tell about how an agent works is by what goes in it and what comes out. And in those cases, you're going to need to do some extensive testing, including extensive edge case testing or beyond edge case testing to see what happens when the agent's being asked to do something it shouldn't or can't do. Another trick here on that, this also kind of addresses the first question. Um, if you have like a non-integrated agent, I recommend creating an agentic user in your system of record specific to each agent,
Hmm.
right? And so that way you can look at your system of record and see everything that that specific agent did and
Mm.
double check that against what that agent is got authorization to do. Right? Because we might be able to say, hey, I asked this agent to like book this journal entry for me. It did it, check, but did it also do something else?
Hmm.
Right? And you might not know that if you're not looking for it. So again, that kind of exemplifies how this is a third thing. It's a little different.
Yeah, so what I hear you saying there is that you're setting up your agentic AI, your AI agents as users on your system of record. When they're extracting data, it's kind of like seeing a human being extract data. You know who did what, who pulled the data, who modified the data, and on that audit trail is right there inside your ERP system.
Yeah, and there's a temptation to say like, oh, I'll have an agentic user. Just one agentic user for all our agents to use. It's like, no, right? Because we want to see what each agent is doing in the system,
Mm.
right? So each agent needs to get its own system user ID so we can track that back. And then you can control the authorization in the system of record as well.
Okay, cool. I think we have time for at least another question or two. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour here. This is a question I love this, but I think I know the answer. I'll ask it anyway. So if you don't have a really big technical team, build, buy, or use, which one should we actually start with if we don't have a big technical team?
Yeah, so I know the temptation here is, and I see this a lot. The temptation is like I don't have like a lot of people. It's like we're going to ask somebody in the tech savvy person and our finance person to build this, right? That might be okay, like for some cases, maybe a proof of concept, but like it is very easy to get in over your head. Where you get one agent, now you got two, now you got five of them. Now, did you think about whole integrated system about like how to control all this stuff? Probably not. And it can get out of control really fast. The best way to start is by using things that are already built into platforms that you already use. If your software vendors don't have agents, they don't have a concrete roadmap, it's time to start thinking about looking for new vendors in your environment.
Yeah. So speaking of which, the next question that actually came in just as you were talking right there is specific to QuickBooks, which is a small SMB mid-market ERP system. But the person didn't put their name in, but they are asking any recommendations for a solution to automate payables, specifically loading vendor invoices into your ERP system.
Yeah, I could, Nick, I could probably let you answer that. So,
Oh, exactly.
I'll try to. So, Auditoria is hosting this webinar today. They provide a platform that does that. I work with Auditoria because I trust and respect their platform. They have competitors out there as well. This isn't I'm to try to be indifferent here in this thing. I will point out a risk that you run into in the QuickBooks environment is that QuickBooks is pretty popular, right? And I am quite certain there is a big market out there for third-party add-ons that have agentic capabilities. Beware. Be careful. Agents don't have to be autonomous, as I said, but they can be. And you may be enabling an agent that does things that you don't want it to do. And so I recommend working with trusted developers on these solutions. And that market is growing quickly because these things are pretty useful. I'll say another thing. The question asked about uploading an invoice. Don't stop there. That is easy. That like reading an invoice, it seems magical. Like we can, with high 90% accuracy, have AI read an invoice and extract all the data out of it. And that might seem like, wow, we've reached the apex. That is just the beginning, right? We can have your systems pick up those invoices, parse them, route them for approvals, send messages back to the vendors when something doesn't match or something's missing, manage that whole interchange with the vendor, and then stage that invoice for payment when it's ready to go. So that you can automate that whole process, especially accounts payable. Don't
Sounds good.
stop.
I
Don't
think we have
stop
time for
there.
one last question, and then let's make this a quick rapid fire one. Mark, what's the biggest mistake you see what the teams make when they're trying to first use agentic AI?
Oh yeah, that's okay, starting too big. That's easy. I see it all the time. People don't acknowledge it until way later in the game, but that's by saying like, I want to automate the close, and we give the directive to some team or a consultant to automate the close process. That is going to take a while to do. Um, the hardest part starting here is breaking it down into smaller pieces, and that's why I presented that three-step framework. Start with small things. Start by retrieving information. Get comfortable with that before you move on into things that are more complicated.
Mark, thank you. This is exactly what our audience needed to hear today. A reminder that the recording of AI Agents for Finance 101 will be hitting your inbox shortly after today's session. So feel free to share it with your teams. We'd love to talk to you about it and answer any questions you might have. And to our colleagues in the UK and EU, we will be replaying this session for you on Friday morning. Thank you for watching. Good morning to y'all. On behalf of Auditoria and Mark McDonald at Finance Next, thanks for spending your Thursday morning with us, and please enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Nick.